Nicole, welcome to Get Shit Done.
Alex, thank you. It's really, really fun to see you. It's been a really long time and it's fun to be here.
Well, to give some context, and also our OG listeners know that I live next to a middle school, and so they're on lunch break, and the principal just keeps yapping, so you're going to hear that in the background. But the way Nicole and I met is from Chicago, where I started my or built my first two companies, and it's so interesting because there was just such a small segment of women entrepreneurs. I mean, now it's booming and there's just so much more, but especially of women entrepreneurs that got to the places we got, and we all knew each other,
Mhm.
like had very similar investors, went to the same events, all of that. So before we dive into the reason you're here today, which I'm really excited about, is I would love to take it back to looking at your entrepreneurial journey and how it got started.
Yeah, I really am nostalgic about those days in Chicago. I miss that community a lot. I started a company out of business school. I went to Kellogg at Northwestern and met my co-founder there. And that I had come from the venture capital world. Prior to that, I um, therapy has revealed to me I really come from I mean, I knew I came from a family of entrepreneurs, but I don't think I realized how much that was just the reality of who I was initially, but ended up launching a company called Brideside that was sort of early in the direct to consumer space in the wedding category. We were a omni-channel retailer of high-end designer bridesmaid dresses and bridal gowns. We had a concierge service. At our peak, we had 50 stylists that could work with hundreds of bridal parties at once on getting them dressed for the wedding. And that company was started in Chicago. We were sort of really early to that scene. We were of the era where, less than, which I think actually the stat hasn't changed, less than
It's the same,
2% of
girl.
venture.
Literally the same.
Yeah.
It's been over 10 years. It's
So
the same.
yeah, it's like that, which it also was the same when I worked in venture years before I even started my own company. Yeah, so that hasn't changed. But yeah, we were a very small club of women with you, raising money. And we became ultimately quite a big business. When COVID hit, which is part of the story, we had seven retail locations. We were about 130 people. Over 90% of our staff were women, across all functions, operations, technology, sales. And it was honestly a blast. And Chicago was sort of the home for it all.
Yes, I love it. I remember, I mean, it was like for like Cecilia Cake Style, Trunk Club. Like, I remember
Hmm.
you all were a little bit ahead of us in terms of when you started. And we used to be like, okay, what are they doing? Like, what worked, what
Oh,
didn't?
really?
Yeah, I mean, because like honestly, it's kind of like what's happening in AI or whatnot. This idea
Hmm.
that if you're pioneering AI, because AI's been around for a long time, so it's been like a
Hmm.
long time, but now the players that are in the market have benefited from the ones who have already kind of laid the foundation and saw what worked and didn't. Now you're seeing like the open AIs that are just blowing up.
Hmm.
And like it's just such a testament, like being first to market is not always the best, but I just loved, like, as much as I hated that we were such a small insular group because we didn't have any choices. Again, the funding wasn't going to women. It was nice because I do really appreciate that I felt a lot of the women, especially the ones that are raised in Chicago, everyone was so generous.
Hmm.
And you don't always get that. So yeah, I'm just happy that we got to meet. And the reason you're here today and us introducing even our founder confessions segment is really tapping on these taboo topics. Like we can go all day to talk about, how you scaled Brideside and all the things. But I think we're in this really critical moment in the world that people want to hear about, like the really touchy stuff that doesn't get airtime, um, and that has a lot of nuance that kind of us we're sitting behind closed doors dealing with it ourselves a lot of times, but we're like, who do we turn to? And quite frankly, I'm tired of reading any more self-help books. Like I'm self-helped out. Now it's more about embodying and embracing. And I came across
Hmm.
an article you wrote in HuffPost around dealing with the grief of losing your husband
Mhm.
or former husband. And I would really love to just walk through what even prompted you to tell that story. And if you'd like to share a little bit about, yeah, that experience for you.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess to give some context for your listeners, so we had been running Brideside for several years. My husband was a huge champion and thought partner for me in the business, not to mention, obviously, the love of my life at the time. And in 2018, he very suddenly, sort of out of the blue, was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma, which is a very rare cancer of the bile ducts. Um, and over the next year and a half, we went through a process of finding him a liver donor, which was his twin brother, which was a largely curative surgery. We were treated at the Mayo Clinic, and he received two-thirds of his twin brother's liver. And very unfortunately, there was a recurrence, which happens in 20% of 10 to 20% of cases. And when he was re-diagnosed, it was terminal at that point because of how aggressive the cancer was. And in August of 2019, he passed away. And in parallel to that, we were in hyper growth for Brideside. I was actually negotiating and ultimately signing um, a term sheet for a $7 million round from the Mayo Clinic in the hours that we were learning that Eric's cancer was confirmed as, having come back and was now terminal. And so this was all happening at the same time. And and then if you sort of like think about just what was happening globally at that time, he passed away in August 2019, March 2020, COVID hits. So there was a lot of personal grief and sort of having to deal with the new reality of my life in parallel to the collective shockwaves and grief that we were all going through. That ultimately, just to give you sort of added context on the business side, we had opened several new retail locations with the growth round that we raised. One of which, I think it was in Boston, opened weeks before COVID hit. And so ultimately, also because of the nature of us being in the wedding industry, and a year that we were meant to double revenue, we had 75% of our market fall out from under us. And the balance sheet went completely upside down. And despite almost selling to a major player in the industry and raising some bridge capital and really honestly doing everything that we could, the company had to shut down very suddenly in November of 2020, which was right before the vaccine and right before the election. Just to give like that context, there was still so much anxiety around what was going to happen just in the world with COVID. So I essentially emerged in 2021 feeling like I had truly lost every part of not only sort of like my life, but also my identity as really just a founder and a wife. That was sort of what I was at that point and sort of came out. So I think that hopefully provides a little bit of context and grounding for what happened after that.
Yes, which a lot of it is around grief. What do we do with grief? And I've been sitting a lot with this too. And when you were speaking, all I kept thinking is when it rains, it pours. And it's
Sure
like
does.
when it rains, it pours. And I feel like I have been in the last couple years being really tested around this idea of like control.
Hmm.
And founders can be visionaries and all these things, but I also think an underlying thing to how we show up in this insidious nature is wanting control. Um, and so I'm curious for you as you're navigating this, like maybe, I mean, that was over, I mean, 2 year period, right? So did it give you any, did you ever go through anything where you're like, this illusion of control was shattered? And I feel like this is very timely because I feel like a lot of founders right now, there's just shit out of your control from, I mean, 2020 alone, it's like no one can predict a pandemic. Like it shut down a lot of things. You
Hmm.
can't predict what's going to happen in your personal life. So, yeah, did you go through a process where you're like, this illusion of what I thought was in my control is not?
Yeah, still going through it. I mean, I think it's all of the things and I'm sure so many of your listeners have been through this, all of the cliche things that you hear about life on like a daily calendar tear off or whatever is like sort of true. Um, I think when it, I guess I would answer that in a couple of ways. One, if you are, I think many entrepreneurs, we almost can't help ourselves because our DNA makeup is a certain way. Maybe you're an Enneagram 7, maybe however it is that you um, are like have figured out how you operate. I think many of us are are drawn to invention, maybe adrenaline. um, Really like we might have grown up being feeling like our value was in our achievement and our sort of like external achievement. And I think for me, it was very much, yes, I had no control over what happened. I also really could have just truly never predicted that my life would have turned out this way. So every illusion of if I work harder, if I invest in the next thing, I mean, truthfully, I didn't, I prioritized being a founder over everything when we were growing Brideside. We were fighting the man. we were, we were like, yeah, we're fighting the patriarchy. We're fighting the market. We're growing revenue. It is all about up, 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 up from a career perspective, from women founder perspective, from just a tactical growth perspective. And if I put the pieces all in the right place correctly, if I invest a little bit more time, if we believe in ourselves, the input will result in an output, right? And that is just not reality. The more you put in or the more you sacrifice does not necessarily guarantee any sort of output. And I think as you move through your 20s and 30s, and for me now, I'm in my early 40s, I have completely reoriented the way that I think about a successful life because of that. Because life in and of itself is about going through all of the things that are ultimately tearing you apart, and that is all part of the experience. So yes, I that loss of control, I think, was ultimately one of the biggest lessons that came out of all of this.
I love this so much. I love it. So I reread your post and we'll link to it in the comments when we publish this. But something that really stood out to me is you said, I thought survival meant running away, but it began instead with staying. That really resonated with me because if you look at like attachment styles, when I am not secure, I've definitely evolved into secure. I'm avoidant. And my mom, remember years ago, sent me a snapshot of Wikipedia's runaway bride. She's like, that's you. And it's really funny because, the perception, I think, publicly, especially in the startup space, because I'm such an advocate and very loud and proud about really advocating for others. Yet there's another side of me when it comes to my emotions and emotionally heavy stuff where I'm like, no, 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 this is too much. This is too much,
Hmm.
because then it's me sitting with myself. So I'm curious for you, what did staying look like?
Hmm. Yeah, and the essay is ultimately about the relationship with Eric, my first husband's parents and family, and feeling like during the most intense periods of his death, feeling like I'm gonna have to truly leave this all behind to move on. And there were a lot of layers of complexity and in all of the family relational dynamics. And I had this conversation with his parents one night over dinner. It was just the three of us, and he was in the hospital. And I said, I just don't know what this is going to look like after he dies. And I just want you to know that. Very like defensive. Um, And what I realized ultimately is that relationship ended up being probably one of, if not the biggest contributor to my healing and to moving to where I am today. And they're basically my parents, and they're my adopted parents today. And I guess I would hold the duality of um, reinvention and the relationships that you need to invest in to get you through that period. So, on the one hand, I guess I would say is that ultimately I oriented so much of my life around my business, but business relationships on some level are business relationships. And that can be a much longer conversation. But what you need when you're a person grieving is quite different. And it's really hard to show up in the way to ask for help in anything that touches, at least for me, my business. I mean, there's a lot that could be unpacked around what investors and co-founders and staff went through during the tumult of all of these things that ultimately are about their own livelihoods and investments and are not about my own healing. And so I really reinvested and invested heavily, I would say, both in the relationship with Erik's family and in my women friends that had nothing to do with my identity as an entrepreneur. And those ultimately became hugely important for me. Um, the pieces around, like I know the like burn things down, move fast and break things, burn things down and reinvent. I think the burning things down to just be avoidant and run away, which I've also done. I was a
It's
short
such a
memory.
founder thing because that's what we're taught in
Right,
startups. Yes.
right,
Build
right.
it, break things.
Right, right. I think like where that's unhealthy, like my grief counselor, the first thing she said to me is don't sell your house. This is like a 101 when you're going through grief, right? You can't move away from your grief. Totally agree. However, truthfully, I have reinvented myself since those days. And I have moved. You just asked, where do you live now? I live in Topanga Canyon. It's a hippie creative town, really in LA, just outside of LA, between Santa Monica and Malibu. um, I used all of that like energy I always have to try new things, to put towards some creative ventures when I was really grieving. So writing was one of them. I wrote a lot. I never thought of myself as a writer. I thought of myself as like concise PowerPoint decker. Like I can write a bullet point like nobody's business.
It's what
But I
you learned
learned
in
how to
business
write.
school, girl. It's the
Right,
whole thing.
right. I learned how to write. I learned how to like sit there for hours and try to express myself through writing. I made a short film that was incredibly vulnerable and honestly like pretty fringe. I took it to some festivals and it like did okay and like I'm really proud of it. I
That's amazing.
reinvested that stuff in my reinvention and I've come out the other side. I'm thinking of starting another company. Like I'm working in business still, but like I did have to reinvent myself and move the energy because the truth was is that everything about who I was and Chicago, my marriage, my co-founder relationship, that was no longer there for me. Like I did have to find a new way. So I think it's a both and a little bit.
Yes, I love this. And, I've said this before on this podcast. I think so much with good intention, content out there to help founders move through is also such a testament to how sad and lonely people are. Um,
Yeah.
we heard about the hero's journey or whatever, and if you look at that, when I look at the illustration now, I'm like, this sucks. This sucks. You see this
Hmm.
lone wolf, and then it's like, well, at this point of your journey, you're gonna have a guide and this. And I'm like, no, literally, if you transform this journey, it should just have a shit ton of people surrounding this little, and first of all, it's not circular. So it's like in this little journey, how unlinear it is,
Hmm.
every part of the way should be around people. And this idea of like burning it down to reinvent, I think is also, and I have done the same thing of, I don't want to sit with this. It's uncomfortable and I want to feel in control. I want to be able to move forward and get to the solution. And sometimes the solution is literally to do nothing but sit with it. So
Hmm.
you understand what you need to do next and feel through it. Like we talk about growth all the time, but I'm like, if I look at nature, like nature doesn't grow constantly. It hibernates. It sits
Hmm.
with itself.
I love that.
And then it has to bloom again. And literally it does it over and over. But our mentality as a collective has become, we're just constantly growing. And it's like, and we're breaking ourselves in the process because you can't constantly grow. And something that really stood out to me around your article, especially around how you talked so dearly about your adopted parents now, and that relationship. And I would love for you just to dive more into how critical that was, because something I'm
Hmm.
talking about a lot with founders and consistently, try to drive home is when things get hard, we go into hyper independence and isolate
Hmm.
because we're ashamed or we're scared or whatever. And I have fucking done it. I have done it.
Hmm.
And it has taken a lot of courage to be like, I am struggling right now. And I loved what you said about it's not just people in business, it is also talking to your mama or talking to whoever in your life. It has nothing to do with the business that can nurture all of these different parts of you. So I would love to hear more about how critical the community side and the people in your
Hmm.
life were through this process of getting through grief and to where you are today.
Yeah, it is so funny. Like, try to get a founder to talk about, like, I don't know, their revenue or where everything's screwed up, or like what their biggest, I mean, there's a lot of performative stuff if you go to like a founder networking event. Truthfully, it's like hard for me to go to those now because it's really
I
hard.
stopped going.
Everyone,
I go to my
yeah,
own
yeah, exactly. I'll go to
because it's
yours.
like real talk.
Yeah, everyone's putting on a face, and like we thought we were constantly failing at Brideside. And now that I know, like coming out the other side, now that I have a lot more context, like, and it's all cleared away, or I look in at founders, I mean, we had grown like a pretty massive business. We were comparing ourselves to maybe like the one or two businesses that were like much bigger than us, but I didn't even realize how successful we were. We literally always thought we were failing and not growing fast enough. And, we had a lot of male investors breathing down our necks about it. And like, it's just not reality. So I think the like power of hindsight and maturity in operating businesses now, it's like, again, just like having a little bit more clear-eyed about the realities of these things. But to your question around the community piece, I think what I you mentioned being lonely, and I'm actually very concerned about that on a more macro level. We hear a lot about the loneliness epidemic, but I'm thinking a lot about the organization that I have just come from. We started during COVID, and so we were entirely remote. And I worried deeply, and I've experienced the lack of like personal relationships, even though you spend so much time with those colleagues on Zoom. Um, Ultimately, those relationships are sort of skin deep because they're not seeing what's going on behind the screen. You're not by the water cooler, tear running down your face because
Ugly
they can't
cry.
see ugly crying. Like they can't see any of that, and that's really tough. And so I think during those girl boss days of everything being invested in the business, I think it was over indexed in like what work needed to mean. It was like there was too much pressure on how much time you were going to spend at work, what those relationships were truly going to mean to you. It was too much. Like you said, you can't truly show up as yourself all the time professionally. In this remote era, I think it over indexed the other way, where I felt like a real deficit of personal connection through working for years and years now over Zoom. And I'm working a lot on now what it means to meet in the middle. And one thing I did was I did a couple of things. Like you said, I really invested in the relationship with my family, and I'm remarried now about a year ago, and I have three stepkids now. It's a very like thing I never would have imagined that. But what we're doing is we're being really thoughtful about what blended family means now. And I write this in the article actually. We've had some very explicit discussions with all of our different families, which is now multi-layered and complicated,
Blended. Mm-hmm.
blended around what it's going to take when we live all over the country and have different relationship dynamics to be a real family. And I feel very like obligated in my early 40s to build like matriarchal power in this new world, economy, whatever you want to call it, where it is harder. It requires finding places to gather and having real ritual around places to gather. This summer, my husband and I had the kids for 3 weeks. We took them to the East Coast and literally spent the entire trip with different parts of our family and network to let the kids spend time together and to build those relational dynamics. We spent the entire time on that. And it also means where I live now, my live in a sort of mountain home has a lot of decks and a big table. I host like a lot of dinners here for people locally who actually mostly come from entirely different worlds. Most of them are from the creative community. My old community in Chicago was really all business people and startup people. These people often have no idea what I even do for work. And it's an investment in actually like nurturing all of the other pieces. And I hope that for work, these things can start to come together, at least for me, where now I'm being a lot more intentional in my next chapter around building a company out here in LA with people that I actually work with in person again. Like swung back, it's just the swinging pendulum of extremes, but trying to find like the right balance. And I don't think we have the answers. If you look at what's happening like culturally and politically, we've gone from like girl boss to trad wives. And
Ooh, child. Yeah.
and we don't have to get into all that now, but I mean, I think it's a cultural reflection on we're all struggling. We all want family, we want partners, maybe we want community. It's not wrong for the trad wife movement to lean into like family or faith or finding like grounding in community. I don't think it's reflected in all the right ways in what we maybe as feminists have fought for, but I think we can all agree we all crave that. And when shit really hits the fan, like you fucking need it really badly.
Right. I love everything you just said. And my thing, it's kind of like whether it's plastic surgery, hair, whatever. I'm just like, do whatever makes you happy. And you can change your mind. I think, I think as women, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be like, well, to be a feminist looks like this. And to your point, while I don't relate to trad wives, what you just said was so beautiful that what you're hearing is more women saying, I want more softness in my life. I'm
Mm-hmm.
tired of having to be so hyper independent. I want family, which is community. I want something. So it's literally like what I grew up with of I was close to my cousins. We played like every weekend. My parents were really adamant about making sure we were going and being exposed to each other. I mean, we would have sleepovers. There's like 15 of us,
Mm-hmm.
but now we're so much more mobile. And I mean, I haven't lived by my family in like almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And people are craving that. Like there's so much technological advances, and you see this all the time through any type of industrial revolution, everything, that we start getting further and further away from the human part. And
Mm-hmm.
people are craving that now, whether it's using AI to have companions. Like they truly want to feel seen, they want to feel supported. But I feel like we have done such a disservice with all of this hyper development and things going much faster than even our parents' generation that we can't slow down just to be like, wait, look at all this upheaval it's created. So something that comes up often from founders, because when we say reach out for support, it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I understand that and I get it. And it's scary, especially when you've operated so much of your life of my strength and is taking it on by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Women, people of color, like you have to be strong. So I'm curious for you, especially for the founders listening in that are just like, well, I saw actually a woman who commented on one of my posts and she said, this resonates with me, but sometimes I've reached out for support and I didn't hear back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard because it's like, in my experience, I've had that happen too. people truly want to help, but then also people are going through their own shit and trying to survive. So it's like, I'm curious from your experience when you had all this shit hitting the fan, you had a company growing exponentially, you had one of the loves of your life pass away, all of you, so much of your identity, so much of your world is collapsing. What did you do to ask for support? So I know
Hmm.
like the dynamic with your adopted parents is really, really big, but how did you wave the flag to say, I
Hmm.
can't do this alone?
Yeah, yeah, no, and I really hear the like, I try to ask for support and I don't hear back. I mean, that happens to me all the time still. I think in a digital world, our relationships, we're all like overly stimulated, and so much of our relationships are very transactional now, and again, they're not like, they miss that sort of like softness and depth of a true relationship, and that can be really, really hard as a founder when you are asking for a lot from other people. Honestly, it might like, it might not be your time to give. I think a lot about how to give back to network, like professional network right now, and community, because I feel like I have taken so much in some ways, from fundraising and building to grieving. Like, I leaned on a lot of people, and now it's like understanding what season you're in and like ways to give back. So I think the asking, I I think from a like relational standpoint, I was really shocked at who showed up. People, the people that show up in a big way, and I have just really learned to move past where you're like pushing on a relationship and it's just not reciprocated, or it feels like, one thing my husband always says is, like, if you think about a tower of Jenga blocks and you're sort of testing which one to pull out, if it's not there, move on, tap the next one. I'm much better at just moving through things a lot more quickly, because like you said, you never know what's going on the other side. Most other people are just as overwhelmed as you, and so they don't have capacity, but the people that do and really lean in, I really slow down for that and make sure it becomes super reciprocal. um, and and I really can't emphasize enough just how much I shifted my focus to personal community, people who knew me for me, who were my best high school friends, who were really, Eric's our good friends from business school, that community that like showed up in a massive way, because those were just really deep, closely held relationships. And it allowed me, and the right grief counseling and therapy, of course, those really allowed me to like, I think from the outside in my business community, I looked very put together through everything, because I was not like losing it in a board meeting. I was not like losing it in a, even when I started a new job, I ended up not starting my own thing again. I took a job, an early stage thing that we grew. But I mean, if you ask that leadership team, many of them probably didn't realize what I was going through during that time when I was still really transitioning to stability. And it's because I was creating my schedule to really slow down. So, one thing I know you had asked at some point when we were prepping, like, what tactically did you do? For a long time, I didn't take meetings before 11 a.m. I
I
just
still
couldn't.
don't.
I was having
It's
trouble.
10.
Yeah.
I don't. I
Yeah.
don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to people before 10 a.m. It is my time. I love that.
Yeah. And like, I wasn't sleeping well. I was really writing a lot. I just needed that space. The other thing I did is I consulted for a long time before I joined full time. So I mean, I couldn't work for more. I mean, once Brideside ended, I couldn't really work for more than like 20, 30 hours a week. Like, that was like a lot for me. And I just made it work. I was creative about, I made more money that year consulting than I ever have in my career. I was,
Yep.
I could I was being creative about how to use my expertise in a fractional capacity. Didn't necessarily love all the projects I was working on. They were paying me a shit ton of money, and I had the space I needed for me. And that was 2 years before I was truly able to regain the energy. And now that I'm thinking of starting something on my own again, I mean, now it's been 5 years. That's how long it took to refill my cup, to be honest.
What I love about this, it keeps going back to you can evolve and grow and change your mind. What success looked like maybe 10 years ago, and I'm recognizing this like a big form of grief for me. So I turned 35 August, early August.
Okay. Hmm.
And for those of you listening, it's October now. And I'm a Leo. I love my birthday. I love everybody's birthday. It's a big thing. This was the first birthday I was grieving parts of myself
Hmm.
that I had never felt like I grieved before, or they had been at least integral to me getting to where I am today. So people are like, oh my God, you crushed it. Or like, even my grandmother, she's like, my grandmother's in her 80s and she's just like, you've lived more lives than people my age, you know?
Hmm.
And I know it's such a blessing in it. And I realized in my 20s, I thought of billion-dollar company, this, let's get it to an IPO. And then I go do all these other things. In my 30s, I'm like, fuck that shit. I don't want any of it. I don't want that smoke. I'm good. But it came to a head this birthday and had to really grieve because I was so attached to that identity or what I thought
Hmm.
made my identity. And to be like, it's okay not to want those and to okay to say, you actually want to prioritize having more time with family and friends. You want to prioritize building a family one day. You want, and it was so hard for the hyper independent free bird in me that was like, what does this mean for me? And then after that, like 4 days later, one of my closest advisors had passed away. And I
Hmm.
had gone through grief with my father passing when I was 19. That's actually when I became an
Hmm.
entrepreneur because I wanted to control this thing that felt heavy and put it somewhere. But it was like, I realized so much of my entrepreneurial journey became about me kind of running from things that were too emotionally heavy. And I'm like, I'm just going to put it here. And it's like at
Hmm.
some point it's going to come back to you. And what's been really helpful for me personally has even in some of my friend groups, to your point, that aren't necessarily business, to say, hey, this has been coming up for me. Like after I had this realization on a beach in Mexico for my birthday, sitting and crying on the beach, texting and voice noting some of my friends who are either my
Hmm.
age or in their 40s and saying, this thing happened. Has this ever had, did this any age happen for you? Every single one was like, oh,
Hmm.
baby. Like, yes, But I think for some people, I loved what you said about Jenga. It's just, you don't have to rely on just one person because I think it's like, okay, I tried one and then I felt burnt. It's like, no, I sent that voice note to at least 5 people. And
Hmm.
some of them waited maybe a week to get back to me because they're like, I wanted to be thoughtful about this, but I didn't, to your point, put my eggs in one basket.
Hmm.
And I loved what you said around like, I gave myself that space to just be and be something else. And I want to move to, the grief that you were going through and to I thought of check on your strong friends when you said this. You didn't look like what we see in the media when someone is really going through something hard where they have an emotional breakdown or whatever it is. It manifests differently in different people. It's like a functional alcoholic or drug addict or whatever. Not everyone is scratching themselves. So I'm curious, as you're going through this, you are in grief, and in grief, everything slows down. But in startups, everything is really fast.
Hmm.
How did you balance, or did you? How the fuck did you get through that? And I loved what you also said around like different season. I'm in a receive season. I'm not supposed to push more. So what
Hmm.
did you do to try to navigate that when personally you needed to slow down, but you have this company?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, really hard. And um, I think in the immediate aftermath of Eric passing away, I don't think one should feel guilt about needing a distraction in certain periods of grief. I actually think that is healthy, um, in the right time. So in the immediate aftermath, I did immerse myself back in the company. And that was really helpful for that period of time, I think. And just because you're like really disoriented, right? And then when the company went away, which was, call it a year later, then it was silence. It was true. I also had gone through a breakup at the same time. Eventually, I moved to LA with a guy I had been set up with about 6 months after Eric died. So I started dating relatively quickly. And that was actually, again,
Yeah,
like a great season and a great distraction to go through, honestly.
good.
for that period, but then it was quiet and everything was sort of gone. And it was like, how do you get back on? I didn't want to lose my career in a big way. I wanted to get back on that train. It was really hard to know how to do that. And I think I like this sounds a little bit cliche. I mean, I did two things. One is the personal boundaries. Like honestly, like the pleasing, or I have to show up as a girl boss, or like I have to show up a certain way or meet the energy. The CEO at my last organization was an incredibly ambitious visionary. He worked all the time, ran a million miles an hour. It's very easy to fall back into that and try to match that. I truthfully didn't. Like I got that reflection back from other colleagues in the years afterwards. Like you always held really good boundaries. It didn't seem like you were spinning your wheels a lot. I hear this when people become mothers too. I haven't had my own kids, but everyone says like immediately you reprioritize. I truly just held those boundaries. I did not care. I was signed off at 3 p.m. if I needed to. I
Good.
was surfing. I was working out. I didn't even, I just like, how did I ever work like 50, 60 hours a week or more? Like, I have like way too much to do for self-care. I really just did hold those boundaries. And I was pretty unapologetic about that, to be honest, because I was like, I lost my husband. What did you do this week? Like, whatever. So I just held that. The other thing I did, I mean, just to be totally honest, and I hope this is okay to say on your show, like I've done psychedelic therapy to help
Yes,
me quite a bit. So, um,
absolutely.
yeah, so um, I did pretty big seasons of that because what that helps me understand is where I am in time and space in my own life and relative to where the world is. I've had to reground. I think one thing for me that happened is when I lost my husband and then a relationship and the fertility stuff and the company, financial, career, everything swirling, it's really hard to know where to focus your time. And this is, I think, with running a company too, you have so much demand on you. You have demand from your family, you have demand from employees, investors, there's so much pressure. And I think understanding what do I need to energetically focus on? Where do I put my energy? um Psychedelic treatment has just personally helped me with that in a massive way. Like this is what's important in my life right now. This is the dynamics relationship dynamics relationally with the people in my life. And so like thematically this is where my energy needs to go. And that has honestly guided me through each chapter in a big way since Eric died.
I love this, and especially around what you said around boundaries, and it reminded me of permission. So a lot of times the whether it's subconscious, these roles we give to men versus women or certain groups, and women are perceived as the nurturers, and so many things are put on us from a emotional container perspective for us to hold on to. And so if you think about, even you're going through personal grief, you're going through business stuff, and then you have the shit show that's happening in the world right now. It feels like there's this collective heaviness happening. And I would love to hear more about how did you give yourself permission to create those boundaries? Because we hear about this all the time. It's like you need to have boundaries. But what I find is a lot of women really struggle giving themselves permission when they're like, well, if I don't do it, who's going to?
Mhm.
I don't see men doing that as much, maybe with the financial stuff, but from an emotional perspective, yeah, men and women have our own burdens, but for women, it's like, I don't think I have permission to assert that boundary because if I don't show up, who's going to actually do it? And that's very mothering, right? So, what gave you the courage and confidence to say, I can assert this boundary? I do have permission. And I know for me, it was my nervous system breaking down and having panic attacks where I was like, fuck this. Fuck this. If I'm going to live like this every day, like this can all burn down. I don't care. But I'm like,
Mhm.
I shouldn't have had to get there because I was holding on to all this psychological bullshit. So I'm curious, what did giving yourself permission look like?
I mean, this is funny you said this because in the world that we're in, um, my last organization was a climate organization, very involved politically. The reason I ended up stepping away was because, particularly when you're at a mission-driven organization, and in the crossfires of Trump, emotionally, I got to that place again. I'd held so many firm boundaries and felt like I had a healthy separation. I was not able to do, I felt myself very quickly sliding back into what you just described when you're in the crossfires of everything that's happening and just the collective grief around this moment. I hold it, to be totally transparent, incredibly, um, in an incredibly heavy way too. And I do notice this in my marriage. I mean, it's a place of friction for sure, because I'm like, why are you not freaking out? And men just, I don't know. I think they've just been able to glide through in some ways a little more easily. It doesn't feel as much as a personal attack. So that is what it is. But I think what I've realized, and this is a bit of the season that I'm in right now, I have left again, a hyper growth organization because we are blocked by the current administration. And I think a lot of climate in its form as it was up until this point, is being blocked. And I have learned from my last bout of moving through grief that a lot of creative solutioning and just creativity and innovation takes sitting in it for a long time. And so what I believe right now is that when we're in this moment, one way to combat anxiety and helplessness and overwhelm is to create and innovate. I think we are in a period of observation. Um, and I've spent the last 6 months honestly doing that. I'm building something new to think about how to participate in the new narrative for society. It's in the creator economy for that reason. It's a completely a new pivot for me professionally as well in some ways. But I've spent a lot of time watching and just sitting in the I don't know what to do next. I've just spent a lot of time sitting in it. And I think I'm getting somewhere with it on the other side. And I do think by sitting in the discomfort and taking a lot of space, that is where the best creative solutioning comes from. And to be honest, my executive functioning doesn't operate at its highest level when I am under pressure and stress. I have now seen that over and over again for myself. And relationally, it's not the most open space place to build the deepest, most productive relationships either, whether it's in a romantic relationship, a business partnership. When you are like, desperation's a stinky cologne. Like when you are in, oh my God, what do I do next? I need to get to the next place. I need to raise more money. I'm running out of cash. We're not growing. That is like a very tough place to operate from. And sometimes when you're running a company, it's just the reality. You are in that season and you just have to do your best. I think I have the good fortune now, and I hope others do as well in their own ways, to take a little bit of quiet and be like, hold on a second. Let's like take a step back and reframe the narrative. I don't believe we can fight this moment with, for example, anti-Trump. My point around girl boss and trad
I
wives
do not
is
think that either. Yep.
we have to find a way to reimagine what life is. We've talked about a lot of these things today: community, the future of work. For me, a big, climate and saving and the growth mindset is very counterproductive to what's needed in
Mm,
the climate movement too. And so I think we need to go higher and reshape the narrative around what does it look like for us all to build our dream life. I'm very focused on building my dream life now because this is all there is. And
mm,
so what is that? Let's actually just like creatively envision that
mm.
and go from there.
I love this because I'm actually sitting with this myself. You said like sitting with the discomfort. Yeah, having that realization on my birthday and grieving parts of myself, grieving loss of people. Um, I started realizing like what does my dream life look like versus something that was sold to me.
Yes, yes.
For example, Mondays, like having the Sunday scaries is not a thing now because Mondays are slow for me. I go on 3 hour walks in the morning. I don't really have meetings, maybe some with my team, but it's not a heavy execution day. And also I know like it's trusting myself because I'm like, when I do execute, I get a lot done in a really short period of time. So I loved what you said around like giving ourselves, a lot of it is giving ourselves permission to say, what does a joyful life look like to me? Which I don't think a lot of us have had the capacity to do because we're inundated with so much information about success looks this way. And then we get there. And I mean, I remember even building my last company. I was sitting there and we would hit milestones and I was numb to it. I was numb because I was always
Hmm.
going after growth, 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 growth. And it's just like, how about I just sit and enjoy and savor? So I'm wondering for the founders listening in who might be going through their own storm, their own grief right now, whether that's a death or divorce, or maybe their company is going to fold, or they're deciding to move away and do build their next dream, but maybe they're holding on so tightly. What would you say to them that you wish someone would have said to you while you were navigating grief in the beginning?
Yeah. It's funny because collectively, I think I'm in this moment where I can recognize that collectively we put value on arbitrary things because we have to create a society and a life for ourselves and milestones. But, you know, I lost my company when we went under. I mean, we lost that company ended up costing me money, not making me money, right? After all of that, we were like on paper very successful, and something completely out of our control um, resulted in honestly pretty much the worst case scenario. I can't, I mean, and I am fine. And I
You
think,
living in a mountain, girl. We love it.
yeah. Like, and I don't want to underestimate like everyone's, I don't want to underestimate safety nets and privilege, and just what it means to truly not be fine. And I don't want to also undersell what it took financially to sort of like claw back. I want to be like real about that. But I think like ultimately, one thing that big mistake I made, and I think a lot of women make it, is we sacrifice. I mean, even like what you pay yourself when you're doing a startup. Like, I think I was like, I got to show everyone that I'm willing to take on the sacrifice as the leader of this company. Investors don't give a shit. Employees ultimately are just looking out for themselves. Like, I think put your oxygen mask on first so that if it all goes away, you have some sort of financial safety net that you've built for yourself. Like, take care of yourself. You are as important as anyone else at the company. In fact, it's more important that you feel safe because you are responsible for having peace of mind and having a collected conscious to run an organization, which maybe a lot of people work for. Like, men do it. I don't think that I realized at the time how much I was not actually like protecting my own self. So I think it's like, but once you have that, once you are, and make sure your company can support that, can support a salary that's allowing you, if the bottom falls out, to be okay for some period of time. And then, like, from there, I think it's knowing, like, if I'm fighting upstream every second of the day or every step of the way, like, I have to ask myself, like, is the business model working? Or should like I be doing this? You just have to be really objective because actually like living your best life and like being really in tune with your intuition and listening means that you're not forcing things upstream. Actually, you're flowing, you're not resisting success. I think we all self-sabotage in that way. You're not resisting what you deserve, which I'm working on, and the life that you have built for yourself. But also I think like with Brideside, ultimately, that business couldn't survive. It really couldn't. Like, there was not, I've come to peace with like that couldn't survive in the era that we were in. And that I'm not gonna like be resentful or hold myself account or blame myself for that for the rest of my life. I have let that go. Like, I don't blame myself for that. We did everything that we could. And like, I think that's just really important to move through these things.
Yes, I love that. And my final question for you is something that stood out to me that you mentioned is, building your dream life. And I think especially millennials, we've lived through this idea of like your dream life, because we went through, you know, Occupy Wall Street, all these things where it's financial burdens. And it was the way out of this is I am going to earn my way out of it. And as we all know, it's like you can't, money cannot buy you peace. It can't buy you happiness, anything like that. And so now you're building your version of a dream life that might have looked different than what you were doing before. I'm wondering what success looks like for you through now these lived experiences, and has it evolved?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely different. For me, it's like having an amazing marriage and family and having the like nervous system, like peace to be able to do that, like to really enjoy building a family and the like and the relational side of things and like working on building friendships. That's like really fundamental, which takes like time and not being stressed, right? It's putting investing in the things financially that are going to ease in order to spend truly more time, not just like have more things or like feel like I can like look externally like I've succeeded. It's just like investing in the things that are going to ease instead of so that I can enjoy that top tier thing, which is like my marriage and building my family and friendships. I think professionally, it I it is continuing to build my own career and impact. I feel an incredible responsibility at almost 42 to help shape the future, which I'm like feel bad about. We haven't done a great job so far.
Yes.
We're
We have a failing grade.
yeah. So here we are. And like, what does that look like now? And I feel an incredible responsibility for that, but I'm gonna do it in a way that does not demand all of my time. So it's number one, having like thinking really creatively about the highest level impact I can have while also building a huge amount of flexibility, honestly, into the business model itself. So that's, I'm looking at much more of like a service, big idea, but services business that is, doesn't take a lot of headcount to scale and have high margins. It's a lot more just of like less of the tech VC thing, a lot healthier growth profile. And beyond that, being outdoors a lot, like that's what I care about. And I think we can all if we connect to our environment in an intimate way, that's a big part of where we go with helping. You said like technology removes us further and further away. We have all the solutions we need to save ourselves. We have all the technology, many smart people. I think we have everything we need. We don't need to build more. We don't need to hop on the next trend. It's actually about like using all of that in a smarter way, I think.
Yes. And I lied. Actually, I have one more question. So, my final question is, if you think of Nicole, 2019, Nicole, we're in 2025. If you could talk to her now, what is one thing you wish she could have known in that moment that you would like her to know now?
Oof. Oh, wow, that's such a good question. Um, oh man. Um, I think it would be like take a step back and let it evolve and like be open. Like let it come to you, let it play out the way the world is going to play out and like step into it and you don't have to fight for it. I think I was just a fighter. I was like, and then I had to fight for my survival after I felt like I lost everything. But like, I'm working on now, like, you don't have to fight. Like, just let it come.